In the land of Skyrim, you may encounter an illegal substance called skooma, an extremely addictive potion that can turn even the most intelligent individuals into mindless thralls or House Drez supporters. Perhaps you even met a skooma addict. Maybe it's a stranger, a friend, a family member, or even your bitch-ass neighbor who is constantly letting their dogs howl in their backyard at 11 p.m. when you're just trying to sleep. But regardless, how do people get addicted? And more importantly, how does this illegal skooma trade work? Well, I want to answer that very question in this video. Hello my fellow hirelings of House Telvanni, I'm Neloth, and today I want to talk about the skooma trade in Skyrim and every aspect about it. I want to discuss who the big players are, how they acquire their skooma or supplies, and also who are the individuals that partake in the use of skooma, aka who are the addicts. I have also created my own map that will give a clearer picture of the entire skooma trade that I will show plenty of times throughout the video. As you can tell by the map, there are a lot of things to take note of and possible connections and routes that I will discuss. I will also be doing a lot of fun speculation as well throughout the video, pointing out possible connections as there are quite a few. And, as stated in the title of the video, I will only be discussing skooma in the region of Skyrim, so I will not be discussing other fantasy drugs like sleeping tree sap, and I won't be mentioning any other skooma operation outside of Skyrim like Elsewhere or Morrowind unless they have a connection to Skyrim. As seen by my key at the bottom left of the map, I have marked certain groups by colors of lines and circles, and I will go over what each of them mean throughout the video, with the exception of the majority of the bandit skooma users highlighted in green, as I did not find them relevant to the video, and the overall skooma trade with one minor exception. With all of that out of the way, let us dive into the interesting crime world of the skooma trade, and trust me, you'll want to stick around for some of this stuff. So let's start with the basics and explain what skooma is specifically. Skooma is an extremely addictive and illegal narcotic that can be smoked through a pipe or drank from a bottle, and was created by the sexy Dunmer in Morrowind using an ingredient called moon sugar. The ingredient moon sugar is a grainy powder of small white crystals that is made from the crop known as moon sugar cane that is primarily grown and produced in the Khajiit homeland known as Elsewhere. It is only grown in Elsewhere because anytime someone tries to grow the crop outside of the Catland, the crops tend to fail harder than the blades in Oblivion. While moon sugar is primarily used as a spice for Khajiiti food, it is also an addictive narcotic on its own, and humans are especially susceptible to its effects. But now, this begs the question, what are the effects of skooma? Well, I'm glad I asked the question, because the effects of skooma often leaves its consumers in a state of euphoria, and will typically make the user stronger and faster. However, they will also be extremely stupid as well, and they will become extremely lethargic when the thrill is over. The long-term effects of constant skooma use often leads to a permanent state of confusion, mental deterioration, loss of literacy and vocabulary, and loss of teeth. Ugh. These symptoms are coincidentally the same symptoms people experience when debating which Civil War faction in Skyrim is better. Now that you have learned or been reminded of what skooma is, now we can get to the heart of the video and analyze the skooma trade in Skyrim and figure out who the movers, the shakers, and the fuckers are. As I said at the beginning, I will be using this map to showcase my findings and speculations throughout the entirety of the video, which showcases all known addicts, be them civilian or bandits, and also the primary skooma dealers in Skyrim. So, from what I can gather, there are 3 primary skooma dealers in Skyrim: Sarthis Idren and Cragslane Cavern, Venaris Vulpin and Redwater Den, and the Khajiit Caravans. There are, of course, freelance skooma dealers that you can encounter all over Skyrim, but seeing as how they will be difficult to track on the map, they will not be mentioned. So first, we will start with Sarthis Idren and Cragslane Cavern, who have a skooma operation in the Rift. Sarthis Idren is a Dunmer who sells his skooma on the Riften docks at the Riften warehouse, which according to Wujida has been closed since the Civil War began. He is also guarded at the warehouse by another Dunmer named Orini Dral. Both potential Jarls of Riften, Layla Lawgiver and Maven Black-Briar, are aware of Sarthis' skooma operation and wish to put a stop to it. However, when they send in guards to arrest Sarthis, he is mysteriously gone. The reason why Sarthis disappears every time the guards come a-knockin' is because Sarthis has ears in the Riften Guard, whom he likely pays money to know if the Jarls are up to anything against Sarthis. Sarthis Idren sells his skooma to a number of residents in Riften, and while the Khajiit Caravans sell skooma and also have a trade stop in Riften, I personally believe that all of the skooma in Riften can be attributed to Sarthis Idren due to his location being relatively inside the confines of the city, and the warehouse being a more discreet location to deal skooma. The individuals that likely have purchased their skooma from Sarthis are Wujida, who admits she bought her skooma from Sarthis, Niluva Hlalu, whom's dialogue suggests she uses skooma, and because Wujida mentions Niluva in relation to Sarthis and his operations, Drifa, wife of Bersi Honeyhand, who has a bottle of skooma under her side of the bed in her house. And lastly are the 2 bottles of skooma at Beggar's Row, where the beggars sleep. This means either Edda or Snilf likely purchase skooma from Sarthis with whatever money they can find. Madesi also sleeps in Beggar's Row. However, from his dialogue, I simply don't believe he is an individual that uses skooma. But I don't know for sure, so we will just consider him a possibility. There are many individuals in or near Riften who could purchase skooma from Sarthis in Riften, like Sibby Black-Briar or Vald, or possibly individuals in the Thieves Guild, but there is simply no solid evidence beyond speculation to prove such theories. Now, when discussing Sarthis Idren, I have also mentioned a Cragslane Cavern as well. This is because Cragslane Cavern is where Sarthis gets his shipments of skooma, which is proved by a letter called Shipment Ready in the Riften warehouse that says, Sarthis, just got in a shipment of moon sugar from Morrowind. We're refining it now, and the skooma should be ready by the time you get to Cragslane Cavern. Bring the gold or don't show up at all. Kilnir. Now, this letter confirms that Sarthis Idren gets his skooma from Cragslane Cavern, and also that skooma is created in the same location. Cragslane Cavern is a very interesting location because at the entrance to the cave, there are 2 large dog cages guarded by a Dunmer with the title of Bouncer. Inside the cave, there will be another Dunmer Bouncer guarding the entrance into the operation, and past him there will be a large arena where 2 pit dogs will be fighting each other, and 2 gamblers are watching this fight. To the right of the arena will be a Dunmer barkeep who is armed and another gambler who is unarmed. And to the left of the pit dog arena will be a menacing, heavy armor-wearing Dunmer, only known as the Butcher. It is very clear from the note, and the fact that everyone in Cragslane Cavern is Dunmer, with the exception of the gamblers, that this is a foreign operation from Morrowind, and is not a local Skyrim operation. What is interesting is that the man named Kilnir from the letter that Sarthis Idren possesses does not appear in Cragslane Cavern or in Skyrim in general. In fact, the man does not have any presence in the game files beyond the note, making him rather mysterious. All we know about Kilnir is that he is likely a Nord from his name, and that he is the one, or one of the people, who makes skooma for distribution from the moon sugar that is transported from Morrowind. This fact is even more interesting because while there is an abundance of skooma and moon sugar, there is absolutely no means of producing said skooma. There are no alchemy tables or vats or calcinators of any kind. I have two ideas for why this could be the case. The first reason could be that Bethesda simply did not think that far ahead, and didn't think to add any kind of equipment to create skooma, but I find this reason to be super boring. The second reason could be that the Dunmer at Cragslane Cavern could be moving their operation because they either know of a better place or found out that Sarthis Idren, one of their distributors, was killed and needed to retreat somewhere safe. This would mean that the crates seen in the Butcher's area may not be shipments from Morrowind, but rather the equipment being boxed up and ready to move somewhere else. This could explain why Kilnir, who is more infamous than Dagoth is not at the location and simply disappeared. However, this second theory could be refuted by the presence of the gamblers, but I like to think that the Dunmer boys just want to make as much money as possible before getting out of Dodge, and want everything to look business as usual. Some additional notes about Cragslane Cavern and its operations is that the location is tied to certain Radiant quests that involve either killing bandits or retrieving Karjo's moon amulet from the quote-unquote bandits. This implies that Cragslane Cavern is not only a animal blood sport ring and a skooma lab, but is also a base from which bandits go out and raid farms and caravans. Also, as I stated earlier, Maven Black-Briar is an individual who is antagonistic towards Sarthis Idren and the Dunmer at Cragslane Cavern, and if Jarl will mention that Sarthis has been a thorn in her side for years, and will task you with destroying the whole operation, and afterwards will mention retrieving any goods left behind. This could mean that Maven has a hand in the Skooma Trade, but I find it more likely that Sarthis just pissed off Maven, and that if individuals were addicted to skooma, they would be less inclined to drink Maven's infamous Black-Briar mead. Looking at the map, I believe there are two possible routes to supply Cragslane Cavern with moon sugar. One is from the north from Vardenfell or Blacklight into the Windhelm docks, where it is then transported south. Or two is from the south from the border of Morrowind and Skyrim up through Riften into Cragslane Cavern. I personally believe that the first option is more likely, given Balmora is close by and still makes skooma like Balmora Blue, judging by its name, and also the capital city of Blacklight is close by as well. Next, I want to talk about the Khajiit Caravans. Now, there are 3 separate Khajiit Caravans that all pay a percentage of their profits to Ri'saad, who is the leader of the caravans. Each of the separate caravans goes to and from 2 different cities. Ri'saad's caravan goes from Whiterun to Markarth. Akari's goes from Riften to Dawnstar, and Madron, who is lucky enough to go between Windhelm and Solitude. On a personal note, while mapping out the caravan routes, I found the routes for Akari and Madron to be very odd, because they overlap each other, but that could be discussed in a different video. So you may be asking, what do the Khajiit Caravans have to do with skooma? And the really easy answer is, they sell them. Each Khajiit Caravan trader has in store around 5 bottles of skooma and around 4 pieces of moon sugar. On top of this, if one is a high-ranking member of the Thieves Guild, the fence known as Tonilia will attempt to ally and partner up with the Khajiit Caravans, and give them a satchel of moon sugar as further incentive to ally with the Thieves Guild. Additionally, there is a group of bandits that hold out underneath of Whiterun, and apparently used to do business buying skooma from Akari. In the bandit encampment, you will find a smuggler's note that reads, Akari, you can take those prices and eat them. We found our own source of skooma now, the real stuff, not that watered down third-hand trash you've been selling, and don't even think of ratting us out. One word to the guard, and I'll make sure they know what that seer of yours is really up to. Now, this note gives us an interesting perspective on the Khajiit Caravans, especially with the allegation that skooma is watered down and not as potent. This allegation does have some merit, because in the games Morrowind and Oblivion, skooma was able to fortify speed and strength, and make the consumer much stronger and faster. However, it also vastly decreased intelligence and agility. In Skyrim, partly due to the attribute system being removed, all skooma does is restore 25 points of stamina, the equivalent of a minor stamina potion, so this argument does have a lot of merit, but it would also indicate that Sarthis Idren and Kilmir's operation also resorts to watering down their skooma, considering all of skooma in Skyrim has the same effect. Another interesting fact about the smuggler's note is that it mentions a seer that has a relation to Akari, and coincidentally, there is a seer that lives in Whiterun right next to the bandit encampment, and that seer is Olava the Feeble. Olava, at face value, seems to be like an ordinary old woman who just lives in a shack and occasionally walks around, but she has a dark secret, much darker than being related to a skooma operation, and that is the Dark Brotherhood. See what I did there? Now, not much is known about Olava's connection to the Dark Brotherhood except that she is a friend of Gabriella, a Dark Brotherhood assassin, and can offer those who provide her a token glimpses into the future. It is unclear if Olava used to be a member of the Dark Brotherhood, or if Gabriella has any relation to the Skooma Trade with the Khajiit Caravans, but what is clear is that Olava seems to be connected to Akari and the Skooma Trade, and is apparently up to something. I believe that on top of being a worshipper of Sithis, judging from her dialogue after being given a fortune, Olava is also a skooma dealer or a smuggler of some kind. Which is why I display her on the map as an independent skooma dealer, because while she may assist the caravans, she isn't intrinsically a part of them, and there isn't much information to back anything up. Now, it is a long shot to believe she is a skooma dealer given she is just an old woman, but it is clear that she does have an unsuspecting grandma vibe about her, and she is very dark, like her connection to the Dark Brotherhood. Okay, I'll stop. Also, the note could be referring to anyone, but Olava just is the most educated guess that I can think of. Now, if we look on the map and examine the blue dots, which are civilian skooma users, we can see that the majority of them are rather close to the Khajiit caravan routes, which could lead one to believe the most individuals buy their skooma from the Khajiit. The individuals and groups that I believe purchased skooma from the caravans are as follows. Codrier at Anga's Mill does not have any skooma on his person, but there is a cut quest item from the game called Cordier's Skooma, and while the names are spelled differently, it can be assumed that the bottle was meant for Codrier, and that he would have had a miscellaneous quest tied to him and skooma. The Boethia cultists at the Shrine of Boethia train and plan. There are 3 bottles of skooma next to the tents and bedrolls. This means that one or all of the cultists are engaged in the use of skooma, and considering they just sit on a mountain all day and stab each other, I can understand wanting a quick little escape. Jadar at the Alftand excavation site that failed horribly is a confirmed skooma addict who was given bottles by his brother Jazar, but only gradually in an attempt to rid his brother of his skooma addiction. Jazar most likely bought the skooma from the Khajiit Caravans in either Dawnstar or Windhelm, but it is also possible the skooma was purchased somewhere vastly different, like elsewhere. Laimi, who is the alchemist in Morthal, interestingly enough has 3 bottles of skooma in her shop that are present upstairs in a bowl, but can also be bought directly from Laimi. Because Laimi is an alchemist and that she sells skooma, it could be assumed that she is an independent skooma dealer. However, given her location and the fact that she does not possess any known moon sugar to create said skooma, I'm more inclined to believe she is a skooma user that simply bought bottles from the caravans. Second to last is an old Khajiit named Mazaka, who tends the Solitude Lighthouse. I believe he is a skooma user because about 20 meters northwest of the lighthouse, you can find a very small stash of skooma. Considering there is nobody else around who we can reasonably assume would stash skooma near the lighthouse, I believe it is safe to assume that it belongs to Mazaka. Lastly are the prisoners of Sidna Mine. Sidna Mine is a prison mine made up of mostly forsworn prisoners that are forced to mine silver for the Silver Blood family. The only form of currency down there is skooma that prisoners have smuggled in. Because the majority of the prisoners are forsworn, it could be assumed that the forsworn make their own skooma that they smuggle in. But I have not seen any evidence of this, and it is far more likely that the forsworn members purchase skooma from the Khajiit. Now, when looking back at the map, there are 2 more blue dots that exist in both Windhelm and to the north of Winterhold, but I do not believe these individuals purchased their skooma from the Khajiit, and I will go more onto them towards the end of the video. Similar to Sarthis, Idren, and Kilnir's supply routes, on the map I have listed 2 possible routes where the Khajiit are able to pick up more supplies and, more importantly, skooma. Ri'saad will mention to another Khajiit that they will be getting a new shipment from the south. The 2 routes I have mapped come from either Cyrodiil or Hammerfell. Considering the player character was arrested crossing the border from Cyrodiil to Skyrim at the Pale Pass, and that the location is a Imperial supply line, I believe that the supply route stemming from Hammerfell is much more likely. As I said before, Ri'saad mentions that his shipment will be coming from the south, and considering Hammerfell is more southwest, I believe the origins of Ri'saad's shipment come from either Cyrodiil or, far more likely, elsewhere, as both nations are directly south of Skyrim. Elsewhere would make the most sense, considering that is the homeland of the Khajiit. However, there are many Khajiit that make their home in Cyrodiil, especially in Bravil and Leowin, and should not be dismissed so easily. Also, Cyrodiil is simply much closer to Skyrim than elsewhere. One last thing to note about the Khajiit Caravans before moving on is the fact that they are forbidden from entering the cities of Skyrim because many people view them as pickpockets and skooma dealers. At face value, you may feel sympathy for the Khajiit and believe the Nords are simply bigots in this regard, but their beliefs are actually justified and well-founded, considering the caravans deal in skooma and supply skooma to terrorists like the Forsworn, and can train individuals in pickpocketing and can ally with the Thieves Guild and provide fences for those members. This isn't to say that I dislike the Khajiit. As a Telvanni, I applaud the Khajiit on their efforts, but it is a point I felt compelled to make nonetheless. Going back to Riften, we have one final major skooma organization that was introduced in the Dawnguard DLC, and is by far the most interesting that we have discussed, and that is the Redwater Den. The Redwater Den, as seen on the map, is also located in Riften, and is different because unlike the Dunmer and Khajiit operations where you come, buy skooma, and leave, the Redwater Den serves as a hub where you buy skooma and consume it on site. On the outside, Redwater Den appears to only be a rundown house guarded by 2 lookouts, but inside you will find a doorman, and further in you will find a dealer who sells the fabled Redwater skooma, and past her will be several booths that are being used by skooma addicts. A noble, a bandit, a dead addict, and interestingly enough, an Imperial deserter who was present when Helgen was attacked by Alduin. The skooma dealer is the best source of information before going deeper into Redwater Den, and she will claim that the Redwater Den has the best skooma outside of Balamora, and will state that the secret to their skooma comes from a mystic redwater spring, which allows individuals to experience skooma like never before. When we go even deeper into Redwater Den, past a locked gate, we will uncover a darker purpose behind Redwater Den. The entire organization is run by vampires, led by an even more powerful vampire named Venaris Vulpin. Now first, we will look at Venaris Vulpin's plans and goals as to why a vampire is heading a skooma operation. And then we will look at Redwater skooma specifically, how it's made, its effects, and afterwards we will look at the potential people Redwater Den supplies, although the last part will be a little difficult to figure out. So, Venaris Vulpin is a vampire who came from the Somerset Isles to Skyrim in search of a vampiric source of power called the Bloodspring of Lengir's Feast. After meeting another vampire in Solitude, whom was most likely Sibyl Stentor, he was pointed in the direction of the Rift. The Bloodspring, however, was not what Venaris hoped it would be, because while it provides him with strength and powers, it did not provide him with sustenance like blood does to keep him alive, meaning he would still have to go out hunting. However, when experimenting with the Bloodspring, Venaris discovered that when mortals drink from the Bloodspring, they are given nothing but affliction and addiction, which led Venaris to the idea of using the Bloodspring to get mortals addicted and wanting to come back to the Redwater Den, giving Venaris and his vampire ilk a near limitless supply of blood. This means that unlike the other two skooma operations mentioned, Venaris' operation is not motivated by profit, but rather by the blood of the addicts that are brought in, which on a personal note I think is quite genius. Now, Redwater skooma is different than regular skooma because it is far more potent and has a number of different effects. Where regular skooma only restores stamina by 25 points, Redwater skooma restores 40 points of stamina, and also makes the player's screen purple and blurry for 45 seconds, and will slow the player down for 45 seconds as well. Sadly, there is not enough information on how exactly Redwater skooma is made. Venaris does not specifically write anything about his skooma in his journal, and the only other source is the dealer who sells Redwater skooma at the front of Redwater Den. All we know is that the dealer refers to Redwater skooma to a vampire as dosed skooma, which likely means that skooma is either brought in or produced at Redwater Den and is mixed with the waters from the Bloodspring. It is far more likely that the skooma is produced on site at Redwater Den, because we can find a lab with an alchemy table and lots of vats, as well as around 4 bowls of moon sugar, which is used to produce skooma. Now, as to where Redwater Den gets its moon sugar from is difficult to determine, but the easiest culprit is the Khajiit Caravans. Redwater Den is rather close to Riften and the Khajiit trade route, so it makes sense and there are simply not many other locations possible. Sarthis, Idren, and Kilnir are highly unlikely to supply Redwater Den with moon sugar, primarily because Cragslane Cavern seems to be in the Skooma Trade and not the moon sugar trade, and none of their addicts possess moon sugar, and in Wujita's case, does not even know that moon sugar is used to make skooma. Now, as to who the Redwater Den supplies is a bit difficult to determine, because the den was added in the Dawnguard DLC after the region of Skyrim had been mostly fleshed out. However, because of how Redwater Den operates with booths, and the fact that Venaris Vulpin and the other vampires use the skooma to get blood from addicts, I believe they don't really quote-unquote supply anyone, and the location is more of a tourist attraction for skooma addicts, which is a pretty fucking funny concept when you think of it. And that is all 3 of the primary skooma dealers that exist in Skyrim. However, there are 3 locations I want to mention that I have not talked about yet, and that is the possible skooma smuggling at the East Empire Company, the crew of the Red Wave at the Solitude Docks, and the skooma users and possible skooma smugglers at the Windhelm Docks. At the East Empire Company warehouse, we can find a singular bottle of skooma near the back, and also in the back will be an entrance to a cave full of bandits that are presumably smugglers. There are 2 possible theories that I have for the skooma bottle that is present at the warehouse. 1, certain sailors that bring supplies into the warehouse also smuggle skooma with them as a side hustle. Or 2, one of the sailors or workers is simply a skooma user and likes to partake in a swig every now and then. While there is only 1 singular bottle of skooma that can be found, I am more inclined to believe my first theory because of the presence of bandits that make their home in a cave that connects to the East Empire warehouse. However, there is simply no other information that can be found about this bottle of skooma. If you have any other ideas, I would love to hear so in the comments down below. Nearby the East Empire Company on the Solitude Docks is the ship of the Red Wave and its crew, whom are pirates and smugglers led by a pirate captain named Safia. One of the crew members of the Red Wave, a Breton named Sabine Niet, or Knight, whatever. Sabine is actually an individual who sells a rare form of skooma called Balamora Blue, and claims to be the only person who can acquire it in all of Tamriel. It is unclear if she sells skooma to any other individuals. However, I don't believe she or any of the Red Wave crew are connected to the bandits that inhabit Brinewater Grotto inside the East Empire Company warehouse. Lastly, at Windhelm, we can meet a Argonian skooma addict named Stands in Shadows that can ask the player to retrieve a bottle of double distilled skooma from the new Nissus Corner Club. Stands in Shadows explains that sailors have stashed the skooma at the Corner Club, and it can be assumed that the sailors our poor Argonian friend is referring to are the sailors of the North Wind ship, led by the boat captain Kjar, as they are the only ship present on the Windhelm docks in the base game before doing any other quests. The sailors of the North Wind likely don't sell their skooma and only use it for themselves for recreational purposes, because they stash their skooma at the Nissus Corner Club, likely to avoid any inspections that might occur by the Windhelm Guard. Also, nobody else in Windhelm except Stands in Shadows uses skooma, so that is another reason why the North Wind does not sell skooma, but rather uses it for personal use. Lastly, on a side note, Septimus Cygnus, far to the north of Winterhold, has a couple bottles of skooma, although how he acquired them is anyone's guess, as he is far from any docks and the Khajiit Caravans, but it could be assumed that either the Red Wave or possibly the North Wind ships passed by Septimus's outpost and sold him that skooma. The fabled Maik the Liar, similar to Septimus Cygnus, also carries 3 bottles of skooma, but in his pockets instead. So, let us now go over everything we have just learned about the skooma trade in Skyrim. The skooma scene in Skyrim is actually a far cry from what it used to be, and is seen by consumers as watered down and third-rate, and is not as potent as the skooma in the Third Era seen in the games Morrowind and Oblivion. Riften appears to be a major hub for dealing skooma, with all 3 skooma dealers being present in the area. Sarthis Idren and his mysterious accomplice Kilnir are primarily a Dunmerry operation that gets its supplies from Morrowind, and Kilnir is an elusive skooma maker that likely escaped the wrath of the Dragonborn, and is perhaps making skooma somewhere else. The Khajiit Caravans may seem innocent at first, but they are adept businessmen, or rather business cats, by day and skooma dealers by night, and supply a vast number of people and potentially sell skooma to the Forsworn. We have the Redwater Den, which is a skooma operation led by vampires and the master vampire, Venars Vulpin, using a mythical blood spring that makes mortals extremely addicted. These vampires seem to care little for profit and rather use the skooma to bring in skooma addicts and feast on their blood. The crew of the Red Wave ship and the Northwind ship seem adept in the Skooma Trade, with the Red Wave doing the selling and the Northwind doing the drinking. Also, our favorite Hermaeus Mora servant, Septimus Cygnus, is a fucking skooma addict. And that is the entire video, my beloved hirelings of House Telvanni. With the exception of my video translating every word wall in Skyrim, this is definitely my most proud video, and one I would consider to be my current magnum opus, so I really hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to let me know by liking the like button, liking the subscribe button, and liking the bell notification down below, and also commenting on what other analysis videos I should do next, because if this video does well, there will be a next time, because I enjoyed it so much. So, with that being said, I will see you whenever the fuck I decide to upload again. House Telvanni be with you.
Please, O hero of Skyrim, I shall be ever so grateful.